Hey everyone. Okay, I know everybody hates phrasal verbs, but there's one thing to remember. Phrasal verbs are not going away just because everybody hates them. So today's video is going to show you a technique that you can use to help you remember phrasal verbs, and especially those phrasal verbs that seem to have similar meanings. The thing is that they don't have similar meanings in the same way that you think they do. So we're going to look at a different technique today that will help you practice, remember, and be able to use phrasal verbs in the future. So before we start, let's do a quick review of what a phrasal verb actually is. In your types of verbs in English, you can have verbs with prepositions, the same as in other languages, in French, in Spanish. And in English, basically, there are two different types of verbs that have prepositions after them. There's your verb with the dependent preposition and your phrasal verb. And the difference is this. With a verb and preposition, the meaning of the basic meaning of the verb doesn't change. So if you talk to someone, you talk with someone, or you talk about a problem, the basic meaning of talk is always the same. It's not like all of a sudden talk takes on this new meaning. The only difference is that we use different prepositions in this case because we're focusing on different subjects, but it doesn't change the meaning of my mouth gives information to your ears. Okay, so a verb like talk is verbal communication. If I put a preposition after it, that idea doesn't change. With a phrasal verb, however, the meaning does change. It's the same way that reflexive verbs change meaning when they're reflexive in Spanish or French, but in English, instead of putting a reflexive suffix after it, we put a preposition after it, an adverb after it, or an adverb plus a preposition. You can have both. The most important thing to remember is that combination turns it into a type of collocation. It changes the original meaning of the verb. So for example, if I take a verb like pick, pick can mean choose. Pick can mean harvest, especially if I'm talking about plants. Or pick can just have the idea of collecting something, especially if it's just moving one thing to another. That doesn't change the basic meaning of the verb. However, if I put pick and the adverb up after it, it does something slightly different. To pick someone up, especially in the context of a bar, isn't really the idea of collecting somebody so much as it is the idea of sex. And that's a really important distinction to remember. Because if you say that you're going to pick your mother up at the grocery store, it is not the same thing as picking up someone in a bar. And your mother will not appreciate it if you confuse the two. And it's things like this that's small wonder that students hate phrasal verbs. However, I'm going to show you a change in thinking that will help at least eliminate some of the confusion. So if you have problems with phrasal verbs, try this. When you think about it, you can have an infinite number of verbs that form phrasal verbs. Get, make, do, have, go, set, wait, keep, run, turn, break, look, get. I don't know how many verbs there are. I don't know that anybody's actually ever tried to count this. But when you think of the particles, the adverbs, and the prepositions that go after a phrasal verb, there really aren't that many of them. So if I go to my English-only dictionary, for example, and I look up the word up, I might have definitions like an upward motion, complete an action, amongst some of them. That's interesting. Because completing an action, I've got several phrasal verbs with up that fit that description. Shut up, complete your talking. Use up, complete the supply of something. Give up, complete your hope in the sense of not having it anymore. Interesting. I have 3 different verbs, but the particle always has the same meaning. Okay, so as an experiment, let's try this with down, which is the opposite of up. Once again, I consult my English-only dictionary. I see that down gives me three particular definitions. Stop working, not function, or downward motion. Interesting. We've got phrasal verbs that work with that. Step down. The politician stepped down after he was accused of corruption. Wind down. We had to wind down the business because we weren't making enough money. Get something down. Wait, don't tell me your phone number. I need to get a pen before I try to get this down. So that's interesting because you can have an infinite number of verbs. Particles? I don't know, maybe 20. And of those, you're not going to be using all 20 all the time. It's going to be they're going to be the particles that tend to come in pairs. Up, down, back, forth, on, off. So that's the thing to take away from today. Don't try to memorize phrasal verbs using the verbs. There are just too many of them. Use the particles and the common definitions of the particles, and that will help you find common context with and among phrasal verbs. And as always, don't forget that you're not really supposed to try to learn all the phrasal verbs that we have on the planet. Just learn the phrasal verbs that are important for you. Phrasal verbs connected to money. Phrasal verbs connected to travel. Phrasal verbs connected to work. Don't try to learn every single one of them. You will drive yourself insane. So, this video forms part of a series of videos that I'm making, and in 2013, I'm aiming to have 300 videos finished by December 31st. If you'd like to follow the progression of the videos, please visit the blog at stop-spanglish.blogspot.ca or www.stopspanglish.com if you'd like more information about English classes for Spanish speakers of English.